What does sensitively mean for you when it comes to parents and carers? What does it mean to be interacting sensitively? Without thinking about it too much, comment below this video right now what pops into your head. Sensitively working with parents and carers in that relationship. I bet things like policy, data security, things like that are going to appear. But you know what? Every time we work sensitively, there is an opposite to that, which is vulnerability. And it can feel quite intimidating to be sensitively working with parents. So what does that actually mean? And can we get a little bit more out of it than policy and data? Let's find out.
Hi, I'm Selena Woodward, and I'm an English and drama teacher, university lecturer, and with edufolios.org, a big-time reflective practitioner. So how can reflective practice help you grow your teaching skills, fall in love with your profession all over again, and help you nail accreditation and teacher registration with less stress and less work? Well, this is the Reflective Teacher Podcast.
Welcome to the Reflective Teacher Podcast. As always, I am your host, accreditation coach, Selena Woodward. Now, this is part 2 in a 2-part series focusing on those focus areas that require us to talk about parents and carers. That's 7.3 and 3.7. If you listened to last week's episode, then you've already received 5 amazing actionable things you can do right now across all of the career stages to explore how parent-carer relationships are impacting on your students' outcomes. And you know that here at Edufolios, here at the Reflective Teacher Podcast, we don't do anything without it having some kind of positive impact. So today, I wanted to delve a little bit deeper, continuing to look at the research that's underpinning all of this, which comes from the Education Endowment Foundation and their work on parent-carer relationships and impact on students. As always, you can find a link to that research at edufolios.org/143, where you'll find the show notes. And every link that I mentioned today is going to be found there at edufolios.org/143. That's edufolios.org/143. So there's going to be a wealth of resources for you today. So I encourage you wholeheartedly to head to those show notes pages. Last week we talked about 5 very big overarching themes around parent-carer relationships. This week I want to delve into just one word. And that word, if you haven't already guessed, is sensitively. At the graduate standard for 7.3, it talks about being able to understand how we can be sensitive in our communications with parents and carers. And of course, if we are not sensitive in those relationships, then it's really hard to build a meaningful, deep connection where you can co-work together, parents and educators, to get the best outcomes for a child. Sensitivity is really important. And yet the most frequently responding answers to what does that mean always comes down to something very cut and dry. No vulnerability, no emotion, or data management, policy. But actually there is a lot more to it. So today I want to explore 4 aspects of sensitivity that come out of this research that can really help you to develop an understanding of those parent-carer relationships and the actions you may need to take to really strengthen them for impact, for positive impact. Okay, so as you're listening to this HA and leads, think about potential professional development. Think about a lead research project. Graduates, this is perfect. It's going to tick so many boxes. I'm going to go into a lot of detail. It's based on research. You're welcome. And proficients, those of you who are getting into this, easing into this relationship, please tune in and let these be a guide to how you could expand those relationships, how you could focus on fixing some of the things that may be feeling really tricky. Remember that less than 10% of us have ever had any PD on this. So this is my offering to you, coming from a base of research from the Education Endowment Foundation. So what are these 4 things as an overview? So the 4 things are: 1, being sensitive to the commitments of the families that you are working with, thinking about what works for them. If you're going to ask them all to rock up at one time at one place, are we being sensitive to their needs? Number 2, being sensitive to a parent's historical experience of school and the cultural identity they have with the school experience. And we'll talk a lot about that. Number 3, being sensitive to emotional responses that come up when we ask to do interventions with our parents. If we're going to run a small group offering on literacy for a specific number of kids, or offer a breakfast club, how do we need to be sensitive? How do we need to show up to make sure that those things are successful and that we're attracting the right parents to those things? And number 4 is being sensitive to the fact that we are professionals in a very niche industry, that we have an entire vocabulary that everybody who is not a teacher has no idea what we're talking about, and that we have a habit of using those words, that language, that professional niche linguistic with our parent body. And what happens if you are not sensitive to that? So 4 things there that we can explore together today. Comment below, which one of those is new to you? Which one of those did you not expect to have amongst 7.3? Is anything there new? Let me know in the comments, because I'd love, that's how I measure impact. Was that new to you? Hopefully you're excited to learn more. So let's dive into it one by one. So number 1, let's be sensitive about the lives of our parents and carers and their commitments outside of school. Let's be sensitive to the way in which the family runs their evenings. For a very long time, parents' evening has been between the hours of, 4 and 10 p.m. I know I used to go to 10 p.m. when I was doing it. Crazy. And it was always on one night, and it was great if both parents could come, but often we'd just get mom. And have we thought about why that is? Now, years ago, mom was probably at home, but mom probably isn't now. The workforce has changed. Mom and dad are both at work. They might not get home till 7. They've got to feed their kids, they've got to feed themselves, and then they've got to get back out to school. It's really hard. And so a number of schools are discovering that parents' evening really isn't working anymore. People aren't rocking up. Now, interestingly, during COVID, we got really sensitive to this problem of transmission. And we created very quickly a creative solution for that problem by actually creating online parent-teacher interviews. And my goodness, did you notice how many more parents could rock up? Did you get an increase in engagement? Are you considering keeping that next year? Did it work? I know that as a parent, my schools have in the past offered the opportunity to Zoom in or to Teams in, and my husband and I have been at different workplaces, and we've both dialed in, we've booked a meeting in our day with our boss's permission, and we've both dialed in and we've done parent interviews from different locations with our son as well, 3-way interviews. And that has worked really well because it's meant no traveling, no interruption. I've booked it ahead because I've had plenty of notice, and I can dial in. Those kind of freedoms are kind of what we're getting used to in our society. So we need to consider that. You know, if I rock up to 7 p.m. parents' evening, that might interrupt the sleep pattern of the child that you want me to talk about. Maybe my kid's in bed at 7 and I don't have a babysitter. You know, there's lots of reasons why parents don't rock up to those things. And if we don't think about that, if we're not sensitive to what parents need, then we're not covering 7.3, are we? We're not being sensitive to that. So HA and leaders who are doing that research, who are doing that PD, think about that deeply. Proficients, look at the times that your parents are selecting. Maybe ask them, when is it convenient? And see what solutions we can come up with. Being sensitive to their work, being sensitive to when they can meet you, and being flexible to that. Ask the questions and be sensitive to that and flexible. Comment below, how was your experience with online interviews? Was it positive? Let me know in the comments whether you're going to keep that, what you learned from that. In fact, write a reflection on it and share the link from your Edufolio in the comments below. I'm going to share a few Edufolio examples with you today in today's episode. Again, show notes, edufolios.org/143 to have a little nosy at some of these example pieces of evidence because they're fantastic and I love to showcase you. Number 2. It's something that will depend very much on your school's cultural sort of environment when it comes to parents. In my experience as an educator, this has come up a lot, and that is being sensitive to a parent's experience of school, what they went through when they went through school. I have definitely worked at sites where the kids will say things to me like, there's no point in me doing this exam. I'm going to work down the road in that factory and I don't need this qualification. But less eloquently put. Those words are not coming from the kids, they're coming from their parents. And so if we can't support parents to feel safe and engaged in the school their kids go to, it's kind of what we end up creating, is we don't create an opportunity to heal that. It's kind of trauma. They've had a bad experience at school where they've been told they're whatever. Sometimes they've just been told they're rubbish at school and it was a waste of time and and there are ways that we can be sensitive to that. And that's a really big part of building that parent-carer relationship, is being sensitive to the fact that the reason mum and dad are not rocking up is because they don't value school, they're a bit scared of school, they see you as an authority figure that is associated with something traumatic and they don't want a bar of it. So they're going to put their defenses up. Does this resonate with any of you? Let me know in the comments without revealing too much. Is this something you've experienced? Being sensitive to our community and thinking of ways to involve parents. For example, in the past, we ran literacy programs with kids and parents, and we helped the parents to learn to read whilst their kids were learning to read. Incredibly vulnerable, incredibly powerful, beautiful stuff. Reprogramming, giving them the opportunity to see school in a very different way and understanding that we've moved forward. How can you show them that? What are you doing? Are you using social media to show them? Are you letting them in to show them? Are you giving them a reason, something in it for them as well as their kids? What kind of things can you do to build that trust back? That through no fault of you, it's not about you, this is about something that happened for them, has been completely destroyed, and school is a negative place, and that's being passed down to their kids. Does that resonate with you? So being sensitive to that. And you know what, I've also taught in schools where the same thing is happening but for different reasons. Perhaps their experience of school was parents didn't get involved. It was all dealt with by the teachers, and all their parents cared about was whether or not they got a good grade because they were too busy and that they just weren't that involved. And so that's being perpetuated. So again, being sensitive, whichever end of the spectrum, whatever's going on, if parents are not engaging, think about their experience of school. Maybe ask them about their experience at school. See if that will help open up something for you and create an opportunity to bridge a gap, which is a huge ask, but it is a beautiful thing to do for someone. On the subject of that and tricky relationships, there's a really, really interesting reflection piece by an Edufolio's user named Byron. Hey Byron, if you're listening, I love this piece that you've written, which is actually about engaging parents who are in prison so that they can be part of the process with their kids. It's fascinating, very different, very edge case, but there's a lot to be learned from his approach. So I'm going to share a direct link to his Edufolio and that piece of evidence if you're keen. So head to edufolios.org/143 to get those show notes and that link. Byron, great piece of writing. It's called Using Technology to Encourage Parents in Prison to Engage in Learning with Their Children Upon Release. Really interesting stuff. The third one addresses being sensitive in a situation where you are trying to solve a problem. Maybe the problem is breakfast. We have breakfast clubs up and down the country, do we not? And we know the research shows that a kid who's had breakfast and is well fed is going to do better. In fact, the research that I'm referring to from the Education Endowment UK board is showing that it actually meant an extra 2 months of progress along the continuum for children who regularly had breakfast in the morning. The research is there. Maybe you're doing a literacy intervention and there's a small group of kids who need extra support and you want to talk to parents about that. Each one of these things needs to be handled very carefully. I know when I was at school back in the day, it was very obvious to me as a teenager particularly that anyone who was on school dinners was poor. That's awful. Those words sound awful, and I'm like, oh, as I'm saying that. But that was the assumption. If you were on school dinners, it was because you were poor. And the reality was Margaret Thatcher made it that way. And, you know, that was good in some ways. You know, like if you had a wage below a certain amount, your kids were entitled to school lunches. But that is a stigma. There's a shame there. There's all sorts of negative emotions that come up around that. And so it's really interesting to think about how you are selling or marketing some of these programs. So breakfast clubs are something that happen all up and down our country. We've got some great charities and great businesses who do just that. Kickstart for Kids comes to mind. Okay, for the reasons that I've outlined, it makes a massive difference. But the way you market that could be the key to getting everybody involved. Being sensitive to the fact that there may be emotions coming up for parents around not being able to provide that are going to create problems. You won't mean to do it as a site. Of course, your intention is not to make them feel bad, but you're reminding them that they can't provide. For some parents, that's the story they're going to say. Some of you might be annoyed by this, but this is a reality. This is what the research is showing too. So when it comes to breakfast club, the research was suggesting, and there was a very specific example about breakfast clubs, that you need to offer it to every child. It needs to become just part of the norm. We have breakfast club. Any child can come. Don't worry about it. It's not just for these kids. It's not the Margaret Thatcher approach. It's for everyone. It's for everyone. And that actually worked really well. So the research for that showed that yes, the kids who couldn't get fed or weren't organized enough in the morning were getting what they needed. And parents actually felt heard and they felt seen without the judgment. And the kids who probably could have got fed at home, their parents also found that it meant less stress in the morning, less chasing the kids, because they knew that was one less thing they had to worry about. And that, of course, also impacts on the start to our day. There's a difference between getting to school, having just been yelled at by mum for half an hour, and we're all guilty of that, and rocking up to school and having some cereal before the day starts. So thinking about how you are framing some of these interventions so that we are sensitive to the stories that our parents and carers might be telling themselves, as sensitive to that, having thought that through, because they won't be obvious to you. Okay, so this is what the research is showing. Try and offer them in a really broad way without any of those stigmas. Have you done that? Tell me in the comments below the video, if you're watching this on YouTube, what your experience of that has been. Do you offer a breakfast club? How does that work? How are you dealing with small literacy interventions and helping parents, or getting parents to school so they can get their kid on time? You know, how are you intervening? What are you doing to help parents feel like this is everyone, we've got you, without attaching any stigma? How are you being sensitive to the problems that are happening? See, sensitive, not just about data. Finally, the fourth one. The fourth one's one of my favorites because I've experienced this both as a parent and as a teacher. I've done the wrong thing as a teacher and I've been frustrated watching my friends receive communications from school that really they shouldn't be receiving. Sometimes we forget that we are professional people with a very specific niche language. We might say in our reports or in our communications with parents, I have differentiated, I've provided a scaffold, I am doing intervention work, I am... All of these words are scary to a parent. They have no idea what you mean. When you say scaffold, they're imagining a building with metal poles. When you say differentiate, don't know what you're talking about. And inevitably, when you are using highfalutin language that means nothing to them, they are at the very best outcome is they switch off and just go, oh, well, they've got it. And of course you've got it, but that's not the intention. The intention is a two-way conversation, but they can't engage with you. And the worst scenario is they feel so intimidated by you that they start to feel distrusted. They start to feel like you know more than them. And you do as a teacher, but what we don't want to do is intimidate and make our parents feel like, you know, we know better than you, because we don't know better than them about their kids. This is meant to be a partnership. That's the whole point of 7.3 and 3.7. We can't make them feel like they don't know what they're doing. They're the kid's parent, right? So it's a really simple thing, but it's really important. An example I can give you, and I've talked about this in the podcast before, one parent that I knew asked a teacher to tell them about their kid's progress. This was a kid with who's gifted, and they wanted to know whether he was being challenged. And the response they got back, without a word of a lie, said things like, X child is working in the zone of proximal development. I ended up translating the whole document for this person because it meant nothing to them. And it came across as very arrogant and very like, why are you challenging me? Because of the way they'd chosen to communicate. The fact that it was in letter, it was in a letter, was also silly. They should have just had a conversation. So thinking about the mode in which you communicate, thinking about the language in which you communicate can make a massive difference. The research from the Education Endowment Foundation suggests things like having part of the parent body, your parent-teacher association, maybe having someone on that body who represents that communication, who you can get advice from, that you can say, can you read this? Not personalized things about kids, but like if you're going to offer a club or something's happening, or you want them to understand a policy or a process that's going on at your site, have someone who's not a teacher and is not your husband or wife because they've heard enough of the language to talk like a teacher, because we're teachers, we talk about what we do all day. A parent, get a parent who's not a teacher to read it and go, don't know what that means, don't know what that is, and work together to make sure that you're communicating in a way that they can understand, that they can connect with, in a way that they feel seen and they feel heard, not, oh, here's all that fangled dangled stuff. For those of you who are wondering what this feels like, it's a bit like if you're not very tech savvy and someone starts talking to you in tech speak. It's that, but teacher speak. Teacher speak is a thing. So be really mindful of it, because the research shows that it's very damaging and not at all helpful. It has the opposite effect of what you think you're doing. And when we spend all day at school talking to our colleagues and they understand us, we sometimes forget that parents are not trained educators and they don't know what half these words mean. When it comes to communicating with parents and carers as well, going back to the idea of when and how that we talked about in the last week's episode, there's a really great piece of evidence written by Lee that I want to share with you from her Edufolio, where she outlines some of the steps she's taken to make sure that parents are clear what's going on, that she's using the right language. It's a really great piece. So well done, Lee. It's a brilliant piece. I'm going to share that in the show notes at edufolios.org/143, another example evidence piece for you around this. Really good work. Really, really good work. So if we put together these 4 things with the 5 things, that's 9 things from last week, can you start to see a new narrative emerging? Some new ways in which you can reflect on parent-carer relationships that don't just involve, I did a parents' evening. I'm talking specifically to those relief teachers out there, to those on pre-service teachers on prac who may have missed the parent-teacher interview. Have you found examples around your school site of some of these communications? Is there a breakfast club? Could you go and find out how that was communicated? Could you be part of the process of trying to get more parents or more kids involved? How can you use what you've heard today to help deepen and broaden your understanding of parent-carer relationships, particularly when it comes to doing so with some sensitivity? Make sure you comment in the section below the video if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, I want you to head over to our YouTube channel and hit subscribe. You know that Edufolios is about to go through a makeover. Every member of Edufolios has received an email with a place to go find some free PD as we make the switch on the 17th of May. We are days away now. And this YouTube channel that I am currently recording on will be full of bonus content that will not be aired on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts because it needs visuals. So if you're listening to this and you're an Edufolios subscriber, you need to come and subscribe to us on YouTube so you can get some of that free PD and have a look at all these bonus materials that I'm creating right now. So if you haven't done so already, I want you to head to edufolios.org/YT and subscribe to the channel. That way you will get notifications for every episode that appears of the podcast and also all of the bonus content that will be coming your way in the next couple of weeks. I'm so excited about the new Edufolios. I really am. And thank you to all of you who've given me feedback and have had a look. We're making the changes as they're coming in. It's going to be fantastic. So comment below if any of this has made you broaden your understanding about parent-teacher relationships. Head to edufolios.org/143 to look at Lee's work, look at Byron's work, and to get a link to the actual research paper. Next week, we're going to continue this theme and we're going to talk about behavior management with parent and carer relationships. We're going to head over to Standard 4. I kind of avoided it thus far, but let's head to policies and practices and procedures. Let's head to Standard 4 with this next week. Until next week, that's it, and I will see you soon on the Reflective Teacher Podcast. Take care.